When I was about 15, I rode around the fields and the orchards. I had no license. And eventually I got another motorcycle to go to work when I was 16. My first job was an apprentice mechanic. And this was in a little town called Ledbury in Herefordshire in England. After that, I joined the RAF when I was 17 and a half. The start was the RAF wanted a team to compete against the Army in trials. That's riding through dirt and water and oil and that sort of thing. And they gave us 3 brand new BSA 650 side valves. And we formed a team for the RAF and we rode for the RAF. Cross country, going through ravines and ditches and rivers. There's no rivers there to speak of, but they made the rivers. The first time we went against the Army in Singapore, we beat them on their own ground. And they didn't like that because our bikes were brand new. Well, we're originally part of the Singapore Motor Club. They had professional motorcycles and they invited us in as privateers and also as RAF riders. I started racing in Singapore from 50 to about 55 or so. All of my bikes were 350s. So I could race in the 350 class, the 500, and the Unlimited. I had a Norton Manx, a pre-war one, pre-World War II, Dot 350 Villiers, a Douglas. The Douglas is a flat twin with the front cylinder forward and the rear cylinder backwards under the seat, and they were a good bike. Ex-World War II matchless dispatch rider's bike, and we stripped it down to nothing and built it back up into a race bike. I rode the matchless from Singapore to Kuala Lumpur, which is 250 miles, and raced it the next day. At that time, we could do anything we wanted to modify them. The main thing we did was all the side engine plates were steel, and in the RAF they were using a material called duralumin. It's like aluminum, but it's lighter and it's stronger. And we had a big machine shop, so they made me all the new plates out of this material. And so we lightened the bike in all ways. Anything that had to be lightened, we took the metal off and put this special metal on there. We thought we had superior brakes on it because we took the brakes off a Chrysler automatic transmission and used that lining for the brake linings on the matchless and the front and rear. And we could put more lining on, and it was a better lining. So we could brake at the last moment and pass somebody while we were braking. And that got us in front. We ran our bikes on aircraft fuel, which was better than the local pump fuel. The aircraft fuel was used in the spotter aircraft, and we managed to get some of that. The Johor Grand Prix, about a 1.5 mile circuit near the Sultan's Palace and down by the coast road. The coast road was a straight, and the rest was all winding up by the palace and down by the jail, and it was all tarmac, but it was not designed, it was just regular roads converted to racetrack. Crowds all around. They had a grandstand built along the seaside so they could see the start and finish. In the Johor Grand Prix, there was 350, 500, and Unlimited. They put 1,000 cc HRD, which was a Black Lightning racer in those races. One year, we had a group arrive from Japan, and they flew in some motorcycles with a Honda 4-cylinder racing bikes. And they were very fast. All they did was scream. So they couldn't corner. So they would pass us on the straights, but we beat them on the corners because they were always all over the road. The next bike was AJS, and that I bought it new. The local representative for AJS managed to acquire a factory racer for me in England, which I went over to England and visited the factory and had it sent back to the Isle of Penang. That was what they use at the Isle of Man or any Grand Prix in Europe. It fit me quite well because in England they call it the boy racer. For a short man or about 5'6", you could sit in the seat and cradle into the frame real easy. And it was designed for scrambling. Our trials, that's racing on dirt or grass. You could go down low and then accelerate up to a high RPM, and you couldn't break it. In those days, you never put your knees out to go around a corner. You tucked your knees in. The tank was built to accommodate your knees. There were flutes in the tank where your knees sat inside. So you lay the bike down as hard as you could, right to the left or right. The engine could be modified by removing the cylinder barrel and taking a space route and bring it down to road racing. So I used to ride it as a street bike, and then for the race, we prepared it for the race, for the Grand Prix, and after the race, back to stock. It was a good bike. It was a darn good bike. Oh, locals, yeah, and there was also several people in Singapore that had factory racers. They were commissioned by Norton or AJS or something, and they sent them bikes out to race. So we're racing against professionals. There was several hill climbs that we did, half-mile hill climbs, half-mile sprints, which would go from A to B in time event. The hill climbs were uphill or through chicanes or some obstacles.
At Kompong Norton, a village 40 miles north of Kuala Lumpur, A Company of the 1st Battalion, the Worcestershire Regiment, get ready for a patrol. Their job? To hunt down red terrorists from the jungle nearby.
Malaya was, they were fighting the communists. So we always had to be cautious of communists everywhere. And if we went in a group, we had to carry a revolver or something else. The possibility of being held up or attacked. I used to experiment every time before we went to lighten something or to get some more power from the engine, a better carburetor or a different exhaust. For racing, in the old days, you had to lengthen or shorten the exhaust pipe, and that gave you the power range that you needed. A few of the races, I got first place or second place, and the second place was because I was being mechanical. I was listening to the engine instead of revving it up. The last race that we had on the factory AJS from England, the Penang race, we ended up taking all the first places for the whole day. 350, 500, unlimited, we took them all. And the second prize was given to a friend of mine who rode a Norton Twin that I tuned up for. All the RAF people classified him as being a Chinese kamikaze pilot because he rode his bikes until they burst. Whereas all the mechanics and all the RAF men drove their bikes according to what the engine could do. And you backed off when you thought you were going to do some damage. But those guys didn't care. If they blew it up, they get another engine. I was reprimanded after the race by the AJS representative because he said, "You're a mechanic." He said, "You're listening to the engine." He said, "The other guy just passes you." 2 races that I was running very fast and I was leading, I had spark plug problems. We couldn't get good spark plugs in those days. In the one race on the AJS, I think I was almost the last lap leading the race, and it packed up. And the AJS man came to me and said, "I had a spark plug in my pocket." He had one. The hill climb, my transportation arrived late and picked me up late, and we got to the race course right at the point that they were announcing my name as the next rider. So I had to unload the bike fast. I didn't have time to change, and the bike wasn't warm, and I took off and I crashed on the first chicane, and I went upside down, and lying behind the chicane was a photographer, and he got a nice picture of me going over on my thumb, which sprained my thumb a little bit. In fact, the one race I was in Johor, I was following an AJS factory racer on his factory bike down the hill towards a corner, which was actually the cornerstone of a jail. And if you didn't make it, you went straight in the wall. And I was coming down, I was following this guy down to the corner, braking hard, and I noticed all of a sudden that his wheel locked up. The chain wasn't revolving, and he went straight across the road and crashed right into the wall. He never survived. 1955, I think. I come around this corner and something else was there, and it pushed me over and I hit my leg on a pole. Steel pole. The only steel pole was there, and broke my leg in 4 places. I haven't ridden since. That was the end of unfortunately, the end of the motorcycle racing. Well, excitement of going there. And riding a bike, of course, which I I didn't ride a bike because it might damage my leg again. So, riding the bike, preparing the bike, that sort of thing.